Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone. So today I'm doing another discussion. This time it's going to be with Mild Maverick. She's someone I saw some of her videos and I got interested. She has some very interesting and unique opinions about different topics. So I wanted to talk to her and like discuss some things more in depth. So yeah, why don't you just give a brief synopsis of yourself and what you do on YouTube and what you talk about?
Well, that's broad. I talk about a lot of stuff. Yeah, I joined YouTube at the beginning of this year, so I'm relatively new. And my favorite topic to cover is feminism, for sure. And I basically talk about anything that I care about politically, anything that pops into my head that I feel like needs to be discussed. So yeah, it's pretty broad, but
Yeah, cool. So yeah, the first thing I want to talk about was like immigration because there's been a lot of discussions about that recently. I had a debate with me and another like leftist talked about immigration with two kind of conservative people. And a lot of
yeah, I
it
think I
was
saw
centered.
some of that.
Yeah, yeah. It was an interesting discussion because like I feel like they took some very like mainline conservative positions and we took a little bit more radical positions. But in the end, I feel like we kind of agreed on what the problem was, but we just didn't agree on the solution, which was interesting. So yeah, why don't you just talk about, I guess, your feelings with like especially like the child separation scandal and like how you feel about that and like what you think should be done to alleviate it.
It's definitely it's a difficult problem, and I should probably say right off the bat, I haven't done as much research on immigration as I have other topics. Which I probably should, but just from what I've seen in the news, it's definitely a terrible situation, and I think something definitely needs to be done about it, and I'm not sure what, because it's difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the good thing is a lot of it's being resolved now. Like a lot of the
Yeah,
families have been reunited. I mean, we should
I
have
think
never
it's
done it
like,
in the first place.
yeah, I think it's up to like 50 or something families that have been reunited.
Yeah, yeah. I saw a bunch of different numbers. So like the stories are coming out now more and more.
Yeah.
Like what happened to the kids, what happened with the family, like what the separation has done to the family, to the children. Not a lot of positives. Not a lot of positives that have been coming from it.
No. And I think even conservatives don't necessarily think that there's a lot of positives. I'm not really a conservative. I'm
Yeah,
not really
yeah.
a leftist either, but
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
I don't want to try to speak for anyone, but I think conservatives don't think that it's right that children are being separated from their families. It's just a question of how do we deal with this? And it's kind of it's a difficult situation, and it's really hard to find a solution while protecting national security at the same time having compassion for these people.
Yeah, I think that the biggest problem for me with the child separation policy was that they were doing it to basically everyone. So like if you came to the United States seeking asylum, they would take
Yeah.
your kids. Like that seems totally unnecessary. I mean, they're not trying to come here illegally. They're trying to like come in a legal way and request asylum. Like, why are we taking their kids with no plan to reunite them at the time? You know.
Yeah, that's true. That is bad.
So yeah, so you would say you're not like you were never a fan of the policy. You would never defend it.
Not really, no. Um, I don't know. Like I said, I haven't done a lot of research into this topic, so I'm not sure if we're going to have a great conversation on this, just because I don't want to talk about something that I don't know anything about and kind
totally.
of step out of my place in that sense.
So on a higher level, like what do you think our policy for immigration should look like? Like what type of immigration controls should we have? Like what kind of limits do you think there should be in terms of the number of people that can come here and not come here?
I mean, I think it should depend on the people. And one of the major problems with our system right now, I feel like, is that we don't have enough people to deal with it, really. You see the case in immigration courts where people have to wait years to have their cases seen. And I think that would just be helpful instead of setting people who can enter the country. Just examining each case with more care and more compassion, I think is what needs to happen. And we just don't have enough judges. We don't have enough going on in the courts to do that right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like there's a huge backlog, and they're not really doing enough to make it an easier process, you know. I think they should make it easier for people to legally come here. Um, I'll run this idea past you. Do you think that if, let's say that I'm someone that I live in like rural Mexico, and I may not have like really high skills, but I can work, and there's someone willing to hire me, do you think that person should basically be allowed to get a green card and work, but maybe not live here permanently, but work?
Yeah, I don't really have an issue with immigration. I don't think that immigrants are coming to take our jobs or anything like that. If anything, I think that just helps by increasing competition. I think that's a good thing. But yeah, my main issue would be with national security, which is, of course, a tiny portion of immigrants entering the country. But
yeah, for sure. And I think so. One of the things I've found in my research, which is interesting, is like one of the biggest reasons why we have such a large illegal immigrant population is that we decided to militarize the border in like basically the 80s and 90s.
Yeah,
and before that, people would they'd come here, they'd work, and then they'd go back to wherever they were from, because, you know, a lot of them don't permanently want to stay here. So once we militarize the border, the probability that you're going to get back is a lot lower. You can't just like go back and forth. So they were forced to stay. And so that caused a large illegal immigrant population that we're still dealing with today, you know?
Yeah, so that's really good.
Yeah, if we just make it easier for people to come back and forth legally, they're going to do it. And it's gonna dramatically change the population of illegal immigrants, and it's going to dramatically reduce the sort of underground economy that's happening.
Yeah, I saw an interesting article recently, just to kind of connect that to more recently. Since the Trump administration has increased the number of ICE agents, there's been an increase in immigration and increase in smugglers. I just think that's interesting with what you're saying with the legislation.
Yeah, because you know, these people are not very good at like understanding economics or understanding how people work. What they don't get is that by making it harder, they're making it more, basically like people have to pay more, and then you need to put in more resources to get people across.
Yeah.
But now people are going to have to pay a lot to get across. If they're willing to do that, then these cartels, now they have a new business, which is instead of selling drugs, it's moving people across the border.
Yeah.
So I guess another interesting topic to talk about in terms of immigration is like a lot of the left has been sort of championing the abolish ICE movement. What do you think of that?
I don't know. Geez, I don't know if we should completely abolish it necessarily. I don't know much about this.
Yeah, is that like too radical? But do you feel like it's too radical? Is it too radical for your Mild Maverick?
Yeah, and you know, I'm radical about some things too. I'm pretty radical about gun control.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I feel like we do need to have some border protection. And so I feel like abolishing ICE isn't necessarily conducive.
I think I can give the best case for why it would be a good idea. So one thing I think a lot of people don't realize is like ICE is not something that's been around as long as like the post office, right? The post office has been around forever, right? So ICE was created after 9/11. So they created ICE, they created DHS, and all these other organizations that were made to basically protect the homeland after 9/11. And since its inception, it's basically kind of grown in terms of what it's been doing. It's sort of overstepped its mission statement. And now I feel like they've become like extreme. You know, they're doing very extreme things, and the type of people that are in the organization are pretty extreme. So like I think you asked a very, very good question. Like, how would we enforce immigration without ICE, right? Or basically, what you're saying is we should enforce immigration, but we need to do it in some fashion that's more reasonable than maybe we are right now. So we used to do it with INS. INS used to enforce immigration before ICE. So I think the best like case to make for it is ICE should just be rolled into INS and have INS do the immigration enforcement as they did before ICE was created. So you would be getting rid of it, but you'd still be enforcing immigration just through another agency that's maybe a little bit less sort of extreme in its inception. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm certainly learning a lot here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure of like the economic ramifications of that or the effects that would have, because again, I haven't looked into this that much.
Yeah.
I feel kind of bad because it's such a major problem in our country, and like I listen to the news and I read news sources about this, but I haven't done the same deep investigation as I feel like I have with a lot of other subjects. So yeah, that sounds great. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it, and I think that a lot of the people that are talking about it are, I mean, a lot of them are basically socialists and even farther than that. Yeah, so it's like, but it's impressive that it's bubbled to the surface. It kind of shows what kind of moment we're in terms of the political discourse, that these ideas are getting up there. But I don't even like the Democratic Party is not even really in favor of it. There was going to be an actual abolish ICE bill, and two Democrats sponsored it. And I think they were going to have, the Republicans were like, oh yeah, we'll have a vote on it. And the people who sponsored it denounced their own bill. So even they think it's like toxic. They're like, oh no. And then actually today, I think it was today, James Comey said, hey, Democrats, don't abolish ICE. Like that's what the Republicans want you to do. So I think even a lot of them think it's too radical.
Yeah.
But I think there's some good ideas behind it, if you position it correctly. But yeah. So yeah, why don't we talk about gun control? I think you have some very interesting ideas. So why don't you talk about your feelings on gun control and where you fall on that part of the debate?
I mean, what I think is best and what I think the country should do are kind of different things. If that makes sense, this is kind of the milder part of my position, because I think we could really decrease gun violence if citizens just didn't own guns privately, if it was just left to the military and organizations that were democratically accountable, that are democratically accountable. Kind of like what happened in Australia. And the thing about that position is I'm going to espouse it and I'm going to argue for it for sure. But I don't think it's possible to do that in our country right now. And I certainly wouldn't want the government to go over the people's heads, in a sense, because so many people don't want this policy. And so that's always something that I have to add on if there are gun control supporters who are like, no, please don't take away my guns. Is I think it has to be something that the American people decide themselves, in a sense. And I'll continue to argue for it for sure, to try to convince people to my viewpoint. But I think what's been going on in Australia with the gun ban, I think there's been just this very clear decline. And if we really do want to stop gun violence, and like all of gun violence, not just mass shootings, but also suicides and homicides, then that's the way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So like a gun buyback, but it's like required, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree, and especially, you can tell from most of the data that the problem is the number of guns and the ease of purchase.
Yeah.
And it causes the mass shootings. It causes like you said, the suicides. That's another thing. Like our suicide rate by gun is so much higher than European countries and places like Australia and the UK. Yeah, and like the number of guns is the problem. There's nothing else that can be said about it, I think.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's so difficult to prevent with just reform, you know, just making it harder to purchase guns, because you can't just look at everybody with depression and say, no, you don't get a gun. That would be just terrible. I mean, that would further stigmatize mental health. So I think it's really difficult to find a solution in public policy for the suicide rate.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And I really feel like it's a sort of genie out of the bottle situation. You know, like once we got this many guns and there's this type of movement around it, it becomes hard to put the genie back in the bottle. The gun genie.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, people are so attached to their guns at this point. I have a lot of trouble understanding it. I try to understand, and I can understand why some people would want guns, like farmers in rural areas who need to protect their livestock, for example. But like, that's a very small portion of the population. So why do we have so many guns?
Yeah, and they don't really like need an AR-15 for their farm.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, with like a I don't know, like there's so like the stuff that people have, just like thinking about what the guy in Las Vegas did, right? Like he basically brought an arsenal to his hotel room, perched up there, and just unloaded like something like over 1,000 bullets, some ridiculous amount of bullets. You know, what do you think of like the Parkland students, the movement they started?
I mean, I think it's really powerful. And as a former high school student like a few months ago, I think it was just really incredible to see these young people who were able to get their voices heard. And we definitely need to be having that conversation. It's absolutely necessary. I'm a little bit worry. I'm sorry, I'm sick. I'm not thinking straight.
Oh, it's okay. You haven't coughed yet. You sound great.
Yeah, I have a slight problem with the idea of reform and like limiting people's access to guns through background checks, just because it's not going to do that much. And I feel like if that kind of policy were implemented, one of two things would happen. Either people would become complacent about the issue and be like, oh, we did something about it, problem solved. Or the amount of shootings would keep happening, and far right-wing conservatives would be like, well, see, it doesn't work after all. And then we'd end up back where we started. So I kind of have an issue with that in a sense, but I don't know. In some senses, I feel like it would be good to have those baby steps to get to a solution that's going to do more.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the main people who started the March for Our Lives movement, they tried really hard to make the policies as, I guess, like make it as moderate as possible so that people wouldn't have really strong objections. And I think if you look at the poll numbers of after the March for Our Lives movement, where people are on assault weapon bans, bans for like other things that make guns more lethal, they've all like shifted dramatically. The way that the NRA's polling numbers shifted dramatically negative.
Yeah,
so
I think amazing.
So I think that their moderation has had positive impact for what the gun reform movement would be. Like, it's made gun reform more popular, and it's like made people more wary of gun advocates. But yeah, I don't think that, like, if we pass all of the things that they wanted, it would not really totally fix the problem. I think there would need to be more steps. One of the things that I heard people talking about that I think would be good, and let me see what you think of this idea, would be to require people to have insurance for certain types of guns that are more dangerous, like an AR-15 or, things that are like highly lethal weapons.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that idea?
What do you mean by insurance? Just like more accountability, more tracking?
Like, they would have to get, it would be like getting a car, right? When you drive a car, you have to have car insurance.
Right, gotcha. In that sense, okay.
So it'd be like if you have an AR-15, you have to have AR-15 insurance just to own it. So yeah, there'd be
Yeah,
another cost associated.
yeah, that's interesting. The closest, like, more moderate solution that I think seems effective is the one in Sweden, where they actually require people to obtain the really dangerous guns to be interviewed by a police officer. And that also helps with education as well, because another major problem is children getting into guns because they're not stored correctly. So in that sense, more education would be helpful in reducing that aspect of it, at least. But that's kind of similar to the insurance, I feel like, is having to go through more to get the gun.
Yeah.
I'm very eloquent today.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I see what you're saying. What are your thoughts on the NRA? Are you up with like the current scandal that they're having with the Russian spy, basically?
No, I'm not. Wait, okay, educate me.
Yeah. So this came out a couple months ago. Some people were digging through their finances and they found that they maybe had some Russian people giving them money. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, and they were like, "Whoa, wait! So you're telling me that Russians gave the NRA money that then was used to advocate for Trump?" And
Oh,
then
okay. There's a lot of Russians connected to Trump stories. It's hard to keep
yeah,
up.
it really is, right? So someone got indicted, and I think she got arrested. She was an actual spy who, infiltrated the NRA and was doing these like cross-country like gun advocacy stuff. But she's a Russian agent, like she works for the Russian government. And it's like, damn, because like now it's like, okay, so like the Russians are now using the NRA to advance their politics, which is like sowing racial and other discord in the United States to cause problems. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
What are my thoughts on that? I think it's ridiculous. I don't know what else there is to say. I mean, this is so weird. I feel like I don't think we've ever had a president that had this level of scandal with other countries interfering in the election.
Yeah, I at least not this level of like stuff being there, because back in the day they really kind of went at each other. Like there's this idea that our politics is more, or whereas our politics is worse and people are more polarized. Like back in the day, they really, like the election in 1800, they both went at each other. Adams claimed that Jefferson had a child with a slave, and Jefferson said that Adams was like he was a puppet of England.
Yeah, so, I don't mean like the level of viciousness in England. I mean like other countries interfering. And I feel like
not to my knowledge, and I agree with you there.
Part of that has to do with just where Russia is right now as a country, and I think part of it also has to do with just the access that we have to media, because it's so much easier to do that, for another country to interfere. And in the election of 1800, it would have been much harder. I'm always fascinated by just the impact of the media on our politics and our elections. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, totally. One thing I'll give Trump credit for is like he was very good using social media, even to this day, to bludgeon people and get his message out there as much as he can. But yeah, I mean, there's upside. It helps people foment revolutions against terrible governments, and it helps terrible governments, install people into other countries. So, but on the NRA issue, I feel like they've gotten. So, do you feel like you're someone who's pretty critical of like the NRA and their advocacy?
Yeah, for sure. I think NRA TV is just ridiculous. Some of the stuff they put out is absurd.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I thought about doing a video on NRA TV. one of the most interesting things that have you watched like some of their videos? They did a video against the Ayatollah. You ever see that?
No, I haven't.
They have some wild stuff. So NRA TV is like it's not really about guns. It's basically just another version
Yeah.
of right. It's just another version of Fox News. One like after the San Bernardino shooting, they made a video where they attacked atheists. They blamed atheists for it in some way, and it's like what? You know, and they just
gotta blame someone.
yeah, yeah, and right. Because it's not the gun. It's not the gun, of course not.
No.
It's got to be something else. So it's atheists, right? So they make a lot of videos where it's just right wingers attacking different people. It's nothing to do with guns, like because like
some of them have to do with guns. I think some of them are just so ridiculous. It's almost funny, but then it's not funny because you remember that there are people who watch this and take it seriously.
yes, exactly.
Oh,
exactly, totally. And you're like, whoa, like this is for real. You know, the things that really scare me is when they start attacking the media. They started attacking like the New York Times, and there was one with Dana Loesch. I think she either burned a newspaper or I think one she burned a newspaper, another one she like flipped the hourglass, like, oh, your time's up, media. And you know, it's a little creepy. It's a little creepy that they're all in unison attacking the media in this way.
Well, and it almost seems like they're trying to gain a monopoly on the media if they're attacking like every other type of media, and they're like, oh no, but you can trust us.
Yes.
Don't worry, you can trust us. So that's a little scary. Like,
yeah,
obviously, sometimes the media does. Oh, sorry. Sometimes the media gets things wrong, and it's fine to criticize them, but can't just say you can't trust anything that comes out of. Very eloquent.
Yeah, they're what they do is they work the refs. Like that's what I would call it. It's just working the refs. They attack the media, attack them, and it works. I saw someone, they did a study recently, and it was like so this is the New York Times and the Washington Post. Okay, the majority of the time their quotes of people are people that are conservatives or Republicans, more so than people that are Democrats or liberals. So what they're doing is working. Like it's just attack the media and then say that they're biased. And then in the end, it's like, oh, wait, they're actually not biased against us. They just like report the truth, which is the truth is against us in some senses. But they give right-wing people and conservatives a voice. Absolutely, in all of these mainstream publications.
And I don't think that's necessarily a problem. You know, the problem is attacking other voices, because I think it's always good to hear both sides of the issue. You know, I think it was good for me to watch NRA TV. You know, it's weird, but I think it's good to gain an understanding of, you know, what other people are thinking.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I think that everyone should have some level of criticism of the media. It's totally valid. I think that like Trump has taken it to its logical conclusion, which is for people whom truth is, you know, it's not on their side. They need to attack people who speak the truth, and so that's why he says all the time, the media are the enemy of the people. The media are this and that, fake news. Like he does it for a reason, and it's been effective. Like. But the effect is that it's harmed our collective sense of what is true, you know. That's a problem.
Yeah,
that's a big problem.
So do you think Trump is a liar?
Well, I mean, he objectively lies all the time. Like, you know, that's what he does.
Yeah,
but that's his power. His power is that he can say things and then make people believe them to be true, right? I mean, you know, if you think about the quintessential thing you'd want a politician to be able to do is say things, have people believe them, and then sort of rally people around them. It's just that he does it for like the worst kind of stuff in a lot of cases. How about you? Like, do you think that he lies constantly, or?
It's really hard for me to tell. I've never met him as a person, and I like to assume the best in people, and that's probably a problem, but it's hard for me to tell if he's lying or mistaken. I want to think he's mistaken. I know I'm kind of naive in that sense, but
you know, I think that kind of hits on something. Like, people don't want to believe that the president is a serial liar or like a racist, you know, things like that. People don't want to believe that. Because once people really start to believe that, then, you know, like, then you have to question everything that he does, right?
I do question everything that he does, because my main issue with him is that he just doesn't know anything. He's got no experience, and that's why I think it could be just that he's mistaken. He's never been educated in constitutional law. He's got no experience in the government. So when some of this stuff happens, I think, okay, well, maybe he's just, you know, spouting off without knowing what he's talking about, which is, you know, its own kind of flaw. But yeah, I'm very careful about what I call people, especially people I don't know really. It's so hard because he definitely has a persona, and I absolutely think he's very good at manipulating views that have kind of lying dormant, that have been lying dormant in the general population. Yeah, I have no problem criticizing Trump. I just have trouble with like attacks on his personality necessarily. Oh, that's not true, because I don't think he has a lot of integrity, but it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. So this kind of brings me to you did a video about it. Basically, it was like, is Trump racist, or like since a lot of people claim that he's racist for different reasons.
Yeah.
I forget what your conclusion to that was. But do you still feel like how would you answer that question today?
I think he says racist things, but I don't think that makes him a racist, because when people say racist things, I think you need to kind of examine what their purpose is. And I think his purpose is just to manipulate people. And I don't think that necessarily proves that he's racist. I think he acknowledges that there are racist people out there, and he can use that. And it's not like, I don't want to make it seem like a lot of Trump supporters are racist, because I feel like part of the appeal of him saying these things is that it's different, you know, it's different from what politicians usually say. And when I talk to relatives or friends who have supported Trump, that's mostly what they say. They say, yeah, I don't agree with everything he says, but, you know, he's not like other politicians. And I think that's what he's trying to do. Maybe he's racist, but I just don't think there's enough to come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I for me, I think on a certain level, it doesn't, sort of like what you said, it doesn't, like he's said racist things for sure. To me, he's done racist things too, like going way back. Like, he got sued by the government for discriminating against Black people.
That's true.
Yeah, like then there was like what was it, the Central Park 5 incident, where he took out a full-page ad asking for them to be executed. Now, my biggest problem with that was then after people showed him evidence that they didn't do it, he basically said he didn't care. So to me, that when you put both of those together, that becomes extremely problematic. Like, when you don't care that you called for someone to get the death penalty and you were wrong, and you're just like, whatever, like, that's a huge problem. I mean, there's a lot of people have created lists of things. Like, there have been many times when he's retweeted white supremacists, and he continues to do it and not really apologize for it. He's retweeted like fake stats on like Black crime. Yeah, there's just tons of things, tons and tons of things. Like the Mexican judge, he said he couldn't preside over his case because he was a Mexican. Like, that was it. So I think that those things prove that both his actions and his statements are racist. And anything derived from there, you know, even if his intent, we can't, no one can see into his mind, right? We can never know. But I think that, to me, that doesn't really matter because he has a long track record of racist statements and actions. So, you know, like the birtherism, stuff like that. Like, so it doesn't really matter because like he has a long history of racism. What do you think?
Oh, you cut out for a second there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I guess that's kind of true. Even if we don't say if he's as a person is racist, his thoughts or not his thoughts, his actions and his words are definitely worth criticizing. Yeah, I just kind of have a problem with the attacks on character from that. In a sense, that's, again, me trying to believe that people are good people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a Trump fan by any means. Can you tell?
But, from this conversation, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. And I think my major problem when people call him racist is they like to extend that to people who support him, which really bugs me. It just, that gets under my skin so much because it contributes to the polarization. And, you know, there are reasons that these people support him. It doesn't necessarily mean they're racist. I mean, there are racists who support him, but yeah, I guess that's kind of why I'm hesitant to call him a racist, is it feels like it's always extended to everyone around him, in a sense.
Yeah, I totally get that. Matter of fact, like this was one of the things that was kind of interesting in the debate I had was like they always kind of pivoted to, oh, so you think that Republicans are racist? And I was like, me and my debate partner were like, no, we don't think that at all. But we think that these policies disproportionately harm people who are not white, you know? So, I mean, I don't know what most Trump supporters think or what they care about. I think that a lot of it is just polarization, like you said. I think we're at a time where, you know, people are going to vote for the party that they feel like they identify with. And I think a lot of it was just the fact that people didn't really like Hillary. Like, I think that the attacks on Hillary worked for certain people more than the attacks on Trump worked. And that's just why we are where we are. You know, because people often forget, very conveniently, that he didn't get more votes. And he was not popular at the time. He's still not popular now.
No, but that's just the fake news. He got more votes. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, so you were sort of a supporter of Hillary Clinton, right?
Yeah. Not like I could vote.
Oh, okay.
but I did. You know, I had discussions with people about it, and if I could vote, I would have voted for Hillary. Even from the beginning, I was never really a Bernie Sanders supporter, just because I like him as a person. I think he's a really nice guy, but I don't know. He just seems old.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of have always been a Hillary supporter, and I don't agree with everything she does. You know, she's not a perfect candidate. She wasn't a perfect candidate by any means, but I definitely think she would have done a better job. Just like her qualifications, and if you look at what people who were in the Senate with her said about her, she's just an incredible person. Of course, she's also a feminist, so there's that.
Yeah, that's something you probably have a problem with.
Major flaw, fatal flaw. No.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually probably someone who supported her like pretty fervently. A little bit more fervently. Like because I'm not really like I'm not actually like a leftist person politically. I'm more of like a center left person, and she's more in my wheelhouse. And so yeah, there's things about Bernie that I think are kind of a problem in terms of the policies, like on face value at least. And I think that there are some gaps. Like if you understand his policies fully, like you understand that there's some gaps in like what he's trying to do.
Yeah,
Like
I
yeah,
definitely agree with Hillary's policies more. That was also a big
yeah.
factor.
I mean, in the end, she's just a very policy wonky person who's kind of boring, you know. It's funny that a policy wonk would incite that much hatred to me. It's just funny. Everyone hates her. Everyone.
Yeah, I know.
Crazy. I have a hard time believing that you were in like high school months ago. Like,
yeah, yeah, I get that a lot. Except, okay, I went on vacation to Europe. I just got back, right? And everyone thought I was like 14. Where did this come from? Yeah. Being
I
in
would
high
think
school,
that you were like mid-20s. Like that's maybe it's the glasses, but
it's the glasses for sure. Yeah, I get a lot of people, a lot of like, I get a lot of MGTOWs commenting on my videos, especially about feminism, and they're always like a woman in her 30s who's realized she needs to settle down. I was like, you think I'm 30? I'm not sure if that's a compliment or something I should be offended by. I think it's kind of both.
it is kind of both, yeah.
Yeah. Double-edged sword.
Yeah, because like you're kind of like they would hold you up as someone who's like gets it, who's like took the red pill, as it were.
Well, and some of them do. The problem is there are misogynists in the men's rights pool, you know? And I feel like I'm gradually steering the conversation towards feminism here. Can you tell?
Yeah, I think that's the perfect next topic.
Yeah. And I mean, there are also misinterests in feminism. So I feel like, you know, you got to deal with the good and the bad. And most of the people who agree with me in terms of feminism have all been like really supportive and really nice. So that's been mostly my experience. But yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like feminism is bad in and of itself, or feminism is bad now? Like,
feminism is bad now.
Okay. So, oh no.
Yeah. I mean, first wave feminism and second wave feminism definitely had their merits. My main problem with feminism, I can point out flaws in it all day long. You know, I think it's very one-sided. It ignores a lot of issues that men are facing, or even denies that men are having issues at all. Having issues, it sounds kind of weird. But my main issue with feminism is that it's not necessary anymore. And I think in some places it is. Just here and in many countries that are similar politically, it's just not necessary. I mean, women are equal to men in every way possible. There's nothing else that we can do here. So it's just kind of, that's my main issue with it, is that I just don't think it's necessary.
So do you believe that like things are going to stay the way they are in terms of women's rights? Do you think that there'll be no sort of receding of women's rights at all in the United States or in the West, as it were?
I don't see any sign of that now, and I don't want to speculate, because if that happens in the future, I'd say, okay, let's bring back feminism, although I'd be a bit more cautious with it, because like I said, I have a lot of problems, but it's not necessary. And if it becomes necessary again, sure. It was effective at giving women equal rights, and that's great, but why is it still here?
Yeah, one of the things that I think of is like, especially now, if you're someone who sees abortion rights as women's rights in the United States, you have to be concerned. Like, I just think that that's just the way it should be, because of the policies of a lot of conservative groups on the state and the federal level, like they've been receding abortion rights since, you know, like the 90s. And, you know, at this point, like with the way the Supreme Court's probably going to be in the future, you know, like the idea that Roe v. Wade means anything going forward is kind of a false idea, because there's a bunch of states where you can legislate abortion providers out of existence. And so effectively abortion is either banned or extremely difficult. So in that sense, I think that if women's rights is needed in the United States.
I don't really see abortion as connected to women's rights in that sense. And actually, I kind of never have. Even when I was a feminist, I thought that was kind of a weak argument, because the reason that conservatives are against abortion, and not just conservatives, there are people across the political spectrum who are against abortion, is because they feel like it's murder. They just have a different idea of when life begins. And that doesn't seem to be connected to sexism to me. It's two different priorities as to what's important. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I would argue though that it doesn't really matter like why they think it. It doesn't matter if their intention is not sexist, because in the United States, the effect of restricting abortion, especially in the states like Texas or Kentucky, you know, these states that are like have very conservative state governments, the effect it has is that poor women have children that they can't really take care of, and then they are denied services to help take care of those children. So it harms poor women when they don't have access to these services. So I don't see how that could not be a women's rights issue.
Because it doesn't have to do with sexism. It doesn't have to do with the patriarchy. You know, you can have opinions on issues that are affecting a certain group of people without believing that that group of people are being marginalized and oppressed, which is the whole feminist narrative.
Yeah, but like if the government is making women have children that they can't take care of and not helping them, like why would it matter what the larger archetype of that what created that system is? Like that's harming women. That harms women, and it makes them have less agency and power over their lives. So why shouldn't there be some type of a group, some type of a movement to advocate for their position, for their autonomy?
The pro-choice movement is. It doesn't have to be a part of the feminist movement.
Okay, I think that's a fair argument. I mean, I'm sure that there's overlap, but you know, that's definitely something.
I'm pro-choice, and I don't see it as being connected to feminism. I just don't, because it doesn't have to do with female oppression.
Yeah, well, I mean, women are affected by abortion access rights, though. Like, it's not men. It's not like it's it's not like if abortion were banned today, it wouldn't affect me at all, but it would affect women. So it just by virtue of that, it has to be an issue centered around women.
I would disagree that it doesn't affect men at all, because obviously men aren't the ones going through with the pregnancy. They're not the ones carrying a child, which is why I think the woman's voice does have more weight, but the father is also there. The father is going to be affected by whether the woman gets an abortion or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. But like you said, it is disproportionate. Like, women have to carry the child. Women take care of the child after it's born. So, I mean, all those things affect the woman's life a lot, right? So being pregnant for 9 months affects you a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
that's mostly why I'm pro-choice, is that it's such a big thing, and it is something that shouldn't be undertaken lightly. And I think everyone has their own moral opinion on whether an abortion is justified. It's a difficult question, you know, and it's one of those things that I feel like there's never going to be an easy answer. Personally, I probably wouldn't want to get an abortion under any circumstances. But I know that other people probably wouldn't feel that way. They don't see a fetus as really a person. And I think just it's an interesting debate, but I don't want to force my opinions on someone else in that sense and say you have to see the fetus as. So that's why I'm pro-choice. Getting off topic a little bit here.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think then that, I guess, feminism is needed in sort of countries where there's more sort of very old school conservative governments that are more repressive on women, but it's not needed here in like countries like the United States? Basically, that's your position?
Yeah. I definitely think, I mean, it was effective in the United States. I think in other countries, I don't want to say like we need to be careful, because that's kind of like the United States jumping in and telling people what to think. But I think if the feminist movement arises in those countries, people need to be kind of careful about it going to the extremes.
Well, that's
Why is that funny?
Well, it's funny because there are places where women are banned from like driving, and
well, yeah, and that's awful. And I think the feminist movement would be great there. It's just, it has to stop at some point, you know? Once women have equal rights there, it has to stop. Do you understand what I'm saying here?
I see the position you're taking. I mean, I'm more of a person who like is in favor of feminism, so I like don't even, I don't even know if I felt like it's gone far enough here totally. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. Like, you feel like there's
Please
things.
Tell me what rights I don't have.
I wouldn't say it's rights. It's more of a cultural thing, right? It's like, do you exist in a culture where like, like someone like Hillary Clinton is not just like totally destroyed by society? And like, when could you have an equal chance?
Woman, though.
I think part of it was sexism. Yeah, I don't think it was 100% of it, but I think part of it was sexism for sure for a lot of people. So you think there was no sexism against Hillary Clinton?
I mean, maybe like a few people. I'm not going to say no one didn't vote for her because she was a woman, but I don't think that was the majority by any means.
And yeah. That's not my argument. I wouldn't say that's my argument. But like, how many people do you think voted against Trump because he was a man?
I think that's kind of different, because women have a different typical role that they're trying to break out of, or that they were trying to break out of. For men, the traditional role is a position of power, and that comes with its own confines. But for Hillary Clinton, obviously there are still people who believe that should be in the home. But Donald Trump isn't going against the traditional male stereotype in any sense. Maybe people wouldn't have voted for him if he was like a complete family man, didn't work a day in his life, and just stayed home taking care of his children.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's pretty valid. I just think that like there's definitely a for stuff like that, like there's still problems for women. Like, our culture is not ingratiated to having women in those positions of power. And I think that was a pretty, like, there was definitely more people who voted against Hillary because she was a woman than people who voted against Trump because he was a man. So like, when that's even, well, sure, but sure. I mean, it also like hurts that she's seen as a liberal woman. So like, why is it then, right? So like, why is it then that? So I think that there's a bunch of women that are conservative that will probably, like, a lot of conservatives really like Nikki Haley, and they've been like pushing Nikki Haley as like, oh yeah, she'll be the first female president. And like, if that were to happen to me, I think like, okay, so why would it be okay for a conservative woman to be president? But then like, if it's a liberal woman, like there's these other hoops to jump over. Right. So to me, there's just like, there's a lot of, in our culture, there's a lot of problems around women in certain areas still. That's just how I feel.
that's hard to put evidence behind, and that doesn't necessarily. It just means I'm not going to believe it until I see evidence behind it, you know, until I see polls about people's reasons for voting for Hillary Clinton, proving that the reason was sexism, because I don't think that's it.
Yeah, I don't think she lost because of sexism, but I do think it affected her negatively. It was another thing that hurt her. I think that saying otherwise is like, I don't know. I just think that it definitely affected her, definitely negatively, more than any man. Like if she was Joe Biden, she probably would have won. Like if it's Joe Biden, it's Hillary Clinton, but Hillary Clinton is Joe Biden, so it's all the same flaws, but it's a guy. She's probably gonna win, you know. That's just what I think.
So. I think the main reason that Trump won is because people were sick of politics as usual. People look at all the problems with politics and they say, oh yeah, that's just those typical politicians. And Trump isn't a typical politician. And that appealed to a lot of people. So I think that's what got him elected, just that he was different. He was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, you know, the other thing too, like
other air.
Yeah. I think this is another problem, right? With Trump from a like women's rights perspective. So this is a guy who has like serially assaulted women, right? We got this guy on tape saying, I grab women by the pussy and I don't even wait. And this guy is in office. He has more power than any human being in the history of the planet. So you're telling me that there's not a problem with women's rights, that we're okay as a country having a guy who says and does those things in power? As not just in power, he's the most powerful human being on the planet.
I don't know why that's connected to human rights. Or to women's rights. He's a terrible person. That's what those tapes show. He is a terrible person. There's
so you don't
no
think
denying that.
Having someone in power who's serially assaulted women is problematic? You don't think there's any problem with that?
Yes, it's problematic, but not because he's assaulted women. It would be problematic if he was assaulting men. This is not a women's rights issue. This is an issue with his character and his integrity.
Well, I think it says more. It does say something about, because like people who like would assault men, they don't get anywhere near as far as he's gotten. Like, can you name me like one politician who's like assaulted men who's as powerful as Donald Trump?
Well, that's not really fair, because we don't hear a lot about assaults on men. We don't. We have this image of the victim of assault as being a woman. And there are nearly as many male victims out there. And yet we don't hear those stories ever. Even with the Me Too movement, we don't see a lot of men stepping forward. Sure, one or two, but even those men seem almost guilty about it. There was a man who said, I don't know if I'm allowed to join the Me Too movement because I'm a man. And I think it's not compare that, because women's assault is given so much media attention, but the same isn't true for male assault.
So do you think that there are people who have assaulted men that are in power that are like basically the men that they assaulted haven't said anything about it?
That could be. I mean, again, that's speculation. I don't really know, but I think it's definitely possible. I mean, we've got a lot of people in Congress, got a lot of presidents, we've had a lot of people in Congress.
Yeah, I get that. I think one good example, there was a Republican who like beat up a reporter once. I think that he lost his reelection after that. But yeah, I mean, in my mind, like, yes, like Donald Trump, a person who said grab him by the pussy and did not lose, people voted for him after they heard that. Okay, people voted for him after they heard that, like, against a person who is just like a neutral centrist. So they're like, you know, I could have a neutral centrist who I think is left wing, or I could have this guy who grabs women by the pussy without asking and has dozens of women say that he assaulted them, and they see that person as being okay. Like we can't divorce it from the fact that he does this to women. and that they made him the most powerful human being on the planet in the history of the Earth. I just don't think you can divorce those things.
History of the Earth.
Yeah, every person who's the president, every next successive president is the most powerful human being in the history of the planet until the global world order changes. He could kill us all with a press of a button. If he felt like it tomorrow, he could just press a button, nuke everybody, and it would be over.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a different way of we frame things differently. In that sense, you know, seeing things as a women's issue or not.
Yeah, I get that. I get that, but yeah. So, but you would agree that you think, going back to, like, I guess where we started with women's rights being needed in maybe other countries, right? I guess you were saying that it needs to stop at a certain point. What would you say is the point where it needs to stop?
When women are equal to men.
Mm-hmm. How would you rate equality?
I think when the majority of women are able to do anything a man can do without worrying about the societal repercussions, that's a good stopping point. I think it happened for us a little while back.
Okay. Well, yeah, when do you think so you think that women's rights is necessary in certain amount of countries on the planet?
Mm-hmm. I just think, you know, we kind of have to be a little bit careful about it because.
Sure. So women's rights.
Why are you laughing?
It's almost like you think women's rights are like nukes, right?
No. I think what comes along with women's rights are like nukes. No, not like. But I think it's important to acknowledge that women aren't the only ones facing problems.
Yeah.
And that's been a major issue with the feminist movement is, you know, we talk about how many women are raped every year, but we don't talk about male rape at all. Mm-hmm. And that's a major problem. And I think it comes from looking at it from a one-sided perspective. So in some ways, feminism has been effective at getting women equal rights, but you have to be kind of careful with how feminism frames things and how you look at things. I think it's important to not get into a certain ideology, because feminism is an ideology. When I was a feminist, I would look at, you know, problems that men had. Say the fact that men don't have domestic violence shelters, even though they're victims just about as much as women are. And I try to find a way to spin that so that was a way that women were oppressed. And I think that's very common with feminism, and that's absolutely a problem. You know, we can say, hey, these women in these other countries really need more rights. They are not equal to men. But we can't ignore the other issues that men might be facing in that society.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point. But do you feel like you should? So do you feel like feminism is like the right or wrong way to advocate for women's rights in these other countries? Because, well, basically what I'm asking is, like, you say that you're not a feminist, right? But would you say that you want?
I'm not a Western feminist. I'm not a feminist in the world where women are equal to men. You know, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, Australia, lots of countries.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But do you feel like feminism is like, would you champion feminism in these other countries where they need it?
Yes, but, you know, being cautious. And I don't think caution is necessarily I don't think caution is necessary so early on, right? Because we didn't get to the point of it's always a women's issue when it was just the first wave feminism, and they were like, hey, can women have the right to vote, please? So yeah, I'd say feminism should be used in those countries as far as it's necessary, because I think where you run into problems is when it's not necessary.
Mm-hmm. Sure. But I just think it's interesting because, like, so you say you're not a feminist, but you think that there are people who need feminism to have equality. So why is it just like the word? Is it just like you don't like the movement in the West?
No, it's because Western feminists don't really talk about other countries a lot. They usually try to talk about facing oppression in the West, and that's a problem for me. You know, when I tell someone that I'm not a feminist, usually I follow it up by saying I'm not really a feminist for our country and for these countries where I think women are equal to men. But feminism in nations where women don't have equal rights, sure, that sounds great. But that's not usually what Western feminists are talking about. You know, when a Western feminist asks me if I'm a feminist, she's kind of asking, you know, do you have a problem with the wage gap? Do you have a problem with women being sexually assaulted more than men? And I don't agree with that. So I have a problem with the word because of all that comes along with it, and especially in the West, because that's usually what we're talking about.
Okay, I think that's fair. I mean, again, I have a little bit more of a different opinion. I think feminism is good everywhere still. But we kind of disagree on that, I
Yeah.
guess. But yeah, like you were talking about sexual assault of men and rape of men. Like, have you seen statistics that show that it's actually equal? Like, have you ever seen that?
Well, here's the thing. Okay. Don't laugh.
Please tell me the thing. Yes.
Don't laugh. Here's the thing. So our definition of rape right now basically means men can't be raped. I have a different idea of what it means to be raped. I think I actually do have those statistics, and I can show them to you. They're not government statistics because the FBI's definition of rape is forced penetration, which is basically like a man is going to be the perpetrator, and most likely a woman's going to be the victim. And that's what kind of skews these statistics. There have been studies, and I can show those to you. They're linked somewhere in my videos. They're somewhere. I can find them and send them to you. But there have been studies that show that women forcing men to penetrate them is more common than we thought. And those are the studies where I get the men and women are assaulted equally figures, because being forced to penetrate should be thought as a valid idea of what constitutes rape. And we have a long ways to go in terms of how we view that crime in this country. It always blows my mind that up until 2012, the FBI literally denied that men could be raped at all. The definition was the carnal knowledge of a female forcibly and against her will. So it was only women can be victims. And that mentality has been around for so long, and it's so hard to change. But I absolutely have a problem with the government's definition of rape, and that kind of makes statistics seem different from what's actually happening.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that we should definitely like sort of try and include those type of statistics in our analysis of it. And I think that's probably something for a movement of, I guess you could call it men's rights or whatever. That would be a good policy to advocate for, to change that definition so that we can include more things. And unfortunately, until then, I feel like we're just kind of in a hazy, like he said, she said, in terms of knowing the truth.
Studies, analyses of crime statistics. I can show those to you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'd love to look at it.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a government statistic to be valid. There are people who analyze government statistics. You know, the number of crimes that are committed and the types of crimes committed, and we can't completely discard that as evidence either. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, my question would always be, who's doing the analysis, and why should I view them as being objective, right? So
you can decide that for yourself.
That's a whole nother thing to look at. But my understanding was like most of the, in terms of penetrative rape that men experience, a lot of that is men that are in prison. Is that like something that you've seen as being the case too, or would you say that's also kind of a misnomer?
No, that's definitely a problem. There is yeah, a lot of men are raped in prison. And a lot of times that's another kind of problem with the government statistics is usually they don't look at prison rape statistics, or they'll look at them separately. They don't kind of combine them into one thing. Yeah, so that is absolutely a problem, rape in prison.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, our prisons are like horrific. Like, I think everyone, including
absolutely
someone who's a feminist, would agree that we need criminal justice reform where these prisons are not torture chambers. Like, it's basically what we're doing. We torture people, we destroy their lives, we make it so that they can't go back into the real world and be a normal functioning person. Yeah, I just, I think a lot of things you bring up are not something that's like in conflict with feminism. A lot, like, it's just, oh, do you disagree?
That's what I thought at first too. And I don't think they're necessarily in conflict, aside from the fact that feminism does tend to brush those under the rug a little bit. But I don't think the core principles of either movement are at each other's throats, in a sense. I think you can have feminism and men's rights at the same time. I don't have an issue with that. But I have issues with feminism kind of separate from that.
Yeah.
And I have issues that are connected to it. Like I said, my main issue with feminism is that I don't think it's necessary anymore. Here, again, to clarify, here, in the United States and other countries.
Yeah. So have you heard anything or seen any of the kind of like the discussion around the incident that happened with Terry Crews? He was like basically sexually assaulted by he was the head of an agency at a party. And then after that, he like took the guy to court, and he was basically a part of the Me Too movement himself. And he recently sort of went in front of Congress talking about what happened to him. I found that incident interesting because I felt like a lot of the blowback he got was from other men, not from women. So to me, like, that is kind of another thing where I think of like, well, people say that feminists are against men, who are saying that they've been assaulted or raped. But when I see a lot of men attacking him, I'm like, well, how's that really the case? What do you think?
Well, let's not assume that all feminists are women and all men's rights activists are men. Hi, I'm here. So yeah, it's not necessarily the two genders so polarized like that. But if we're looking at the blowback from feminists versus men's rights activists, I'm not sure if you'd see the same thing. I don't think feminists are necessarily opposed to men sharing their experiences in that sense. But I think feminists have a narrative to maintain. There's this idea of the patriarchy, and they have to make it seem like women are the ones with the worst lot. They have to make it seem like women are being oppressed. So if there are statistics that come out showing that men are raped equally to women, kind of a weird thing to say. I'm kind of discussing this sort of bluntly, and I'm sorry if that is
no, it's okay.
Triggering to anyone, but it's a horrible crime, and I kind of hate to talk about it without like any emotion in a sense, but I feel like that's kind of what needs to happen sometimes. Yeah, just a little disclaimer. Anyway, I think we don't really hear about like the study that I found. It was reported by a lot of news agencies, and yet it didn't end up on the nightly news anywhere. It didn't end up being shared. It wasn't even on my radar. And I couldn't believe that this study just wasn't getting more attention. And my main problem with feminism in connection with these types of statistics is that they will try to maintain that women are raped more than that's necessary. If they find that everything is equal, then their movement is no longer has any value.
Sure, yeah.
So it's not like they're gonna go against individual men sharing their stories, but they absolutely will if it's too many men, just as many men as women. They're gonna be like, oh, men lying. Kind of a straw man, but yeah. I don't really mean like they'll say like, oh, they're lying, but they will try to not pay as much attention to that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so to sort of like, I guess, sort of the point I was making was talking about like the way that men and women differently reacted to Terry Crews is that I hear a lot of men's rights activists say that the reason why men don't come forward is because they're not taken seriously by the women. And to me, that's a case that shows you like, yes, women take him seriously, men do not. Like a lot of them try to make the case that misandry prevents men from coming forward about being assaulted. Like to me, that just shows that's not really the case. Women are like boosting this guy's signal and saying, hey, this guy was assaulted and it was wrong and this needs to stop. Men were like laughing in his face and like, dude, you should just punch him in the face. Like basically perpetuating what women would call, I think rightfully, toxic masculinity. So to me, that's why I think it kind of shows that in a lot of cases, like feminism and women are, well, I'd just say feminism is right about these issues. Like, yes, it's a toxic mentality in men that is harming men and women, right? Because people who are toxic in that sense, they assault women. And then when men get assaulted by the men, they say, well, you should resolve it with violence, right?
Okay, yeah. Feminists will say that they're helping men as well, but they never talk about men's issues. If someone tries to bring up men's issues, they kind of minimize them. Sure. And I feel like at this point,
yeah, go ahead.
I feel like at this point, we're both kind of talking in attitudes, and it's really hard to measure attitudes. You say, there are all these women boosting him up and supporting him. There are also probably plenty of women who are tearing him down. And it's really hard to quantify that and tell. It's mostly based on personal experience, which is really hard to deal with. And I don't like because it's not quite as concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's part of the reason this debate is so hard.
Yeah. I bring that up because like that's something I've heard men's rights activists say to me. It's like, oh, well, yeah, like misandry is a huge problem for men. And I don't know, like I think toxic masculinity, I don't know how do you feel about that term? Like, do you think that that is a thing? Do you think that exists?
I think I agree with what feminists define as toxic masculinity in a sense. Because it's connected to this idea that men are tough and masculine. Well, masculine, and I guess I kind of agree that men are incorrectly being told that they can't feel things, that they can't be as good at taking care of children. But one second, let me collect my thoughts here.
Yeah, no worries. It's a big topic, right?
Yeah, it is. I think God, I don't know. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I feel like
toxic
we could have
masculinity. It's kind of like my main problem with it, and the problem that I see a lot of men having with it is it implies that like masculinity is toxic. The act of being a man is toxic, and obviously being a man shouldn't be seen as toxic. So I think it's just kind of a hard label to use, and it's not necessarily entirely correct, but I guess I'd agree with what it's usually identifying.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, again, I think it's sort of accurate. And, but yeah, it shouldn't say all masculine things are toxic. Right. But I feel like that's kind of like a lot of people strawman them in that way sometimes.
I don't think it's entirely men's fault either. It's not entirely self-inflicted misandry, or I guess internalized misandry. Internalized misogyny with feminism seems to be a thing they talk about a lot. I think it's not necessarily like anyone in particular is responsible for this. These are just the roles that our society has grown with, that our society has developed into, and they can be extremely harmful and restrictive. So I don't see it as like women are keeping men down. In the same way that when I was a feminist, I didn't see it as like men keeping women down. I saw it as this is an issue with the way that we see men and women and the expectations that we have of them. It's not necessarily a particular group that's doing it. It's more like this abstract idea of what a man and a woman should be.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So yeah, like just to sort of wrap things up, I was curious about. So you did a video about like the gender binary.
We're just gonna do this in the last few minutes here.
Yeah. So do you still feel like gender is strictly a binary, or do you feel like what are your thoughts on, I guess, non-binary people and that whole?
I mean, honestly, I don't really care what people choose to identify themselves with. You know, if people are saying they're non-binary, I don't think that necessarily has any particularly dangerous outcomes. I don't have an issue with it. And if someone's non-binary, obviously I'll use their pronouns. I'll respect them in that sense. But I don't think that's a thing that really exists.
Okay, so you think it's not true in the scientific sense, but you would respect their right to be referred to in the way they like, basically.
Yeah, because they'd probably, if I didn't refer to them by the correct pronoun, they would take it as if I was disrespecting them. And in a sense, I can see that. And I don't think that's necessarily the intention of people who don't use non-pronouns, but I don't want to involve like individual people in a broader debate about the value of a non-binary identity. You know, I don't want to put a non-binary person on the spot and say, hey, defend your identity to me right now. But I think it is something that we need to be talking about and that we can have discussions about. I feel like a lot of times there's this bubble around it, you know, like we can't talk about what people choose to identify as, even if it seems a little bit iffy.
Yeah, I sort of agree with that. I think that there should, and on a certain level, be more of an open discussion about it. And it's not something that's totally set in stone. It's changing like quite a bit. Like one article I read said that a lot of the gender, like the way people act, is sort of dictated by their sex, but it's not a hard like binary, right? There's still some.
Yeah, that's true. And there are people who have traits that are feminine and masculine. And I have some masculine traits. I don't think that means I don't fall into the feminine category. And I think it's really difficult to have discussions about this. And, I'll say I think the non-binary identity is a little bit iffy. But at the same time, I'm not going to say that that's like my set in stone position because we don't know that much about it. This is kind of a new thing that's happening. Yeah. We don't have that much evidence as to the legitimacy of it. It's really been proven, and it's something that we need to accept. I think we should continue to discuss it, and I don't think it should be completely rejected either.
Yeah, I generally basically agree with that. My sort of default is to like sort of try to respect these people and allow them to exist the way they want. I also like have a hard time believing that gender, like which is specifically how we view people, has something to do with like their biological sex. Because like when I look at you, I don't see like your chromosomes, right? I just see the way that you look and the way you present yourself, and then my cultural inputs interpret like a lot of those things. Now, a lot of like your characteristics or my characteristics are determined by our sex, but that's not the only thing. There's these other things that are cultural too that also filter them out. And I think we need to not sort of lose sight of that fact,
Yeah, well, I don't think that gender and sex are very strictly connected. I mean, transgender people are a thing. There are people who don't agree with the sex that they were born with, and that has been scientifically proven. And that's why I can accept that more. You know, if you look at the brains of transgender women, they very closely resemble cisgender women. It's something scientifically proven. But I think the fact that male and female brains are so different, they do have differences, kind of indicates that it is more of a binary.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be sort of discovered there too, like the type of archetypes that people fall into in the different categories. But yeah, I think the problem a lot of people have, and it's that a lot of these people use that to like try and justify hierarchy. They try to justify, oh well, so women are like this, therefore women should not do this, and it's usually like being in positions of power. I have a problem with that, but I don't have a problem with saying.
I haven't encountered that at all.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the Jordan Peterson, of the world.
Oh yeah, I started watching a Jordan Peterson video once, and he was like, he seemed very arrogant, and I just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
So I haven't had a ton of exposure to Jordan Peterson, but
yeah,
I guess that's probably why I haven't encountered that as much.
Yeah. And so I feel like him and his acolytes are kind of going in that direction where it's like, well, you see, like men think like this. Men are more likely to have these things. And they, they're very smart. They don't say all of them. They'll say, but a lot of them. And I feel like they're using it to justify, people like Trump being in power in a certain way. It's just like, well, yeah, more men are going to be in positions of power. More men are going to be in high, like CEOs, blah, blah, blah. And, I think a lot of people say, well, no, I think that has more to do with a bit more as well to do with our culture and not just strictly to do with these predetermined things in terms of the way men and women are,
I mean, I definitely don't agree that should be used to justify things, but I think it's true. I mean, men and women are different, and they can be more likely to do certain things. But at the same time, I think you can kind of acknowledge that when looking at the trends in the workplace, for example, why women don't really ask for a raise as much as men do. And I think you can't look at that with individuals. You can't look at a woman and be like, hey, you're not going to be as good at math. Because, maybe she would be, even though women are less likely to be good at math. I can show you a source for that as well. I didn't. I feel like I should have come into this with my list of sources.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been a nice kind of casual discussion,
Yeah, that's true.
We're not like sending barbs at each other.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm always a little worried because I feel like debates can get so nasty and it's awful.
Oh, yeah.
And that happened to me some in high school. Like I would debate politics a lot, and I got in trouble a lot for saying I didn't want to be a feminist anymore. And I got awful. Yeah, high school's awful.
Yeah,
I hope college is better.
High school is awful. College is definitely better. From my experience, I'll tell you, my college time was way better.
I'm going to a really liberal school, though, so.
Yeah.
We'll
So, how do you feel about like people shutting down speakers? Like, so, okay, let me give you a scenario. So, let's say that Milo came to your school, and Milo, well, this probably wouldn't happen, but because he kind of, like after the pedophilia thing, he kind of is not a thing anymore. But let's just to give an example, let's say that he was going to come to your school, right? But before he came, he said, oh yeah, so when I come, I'm going to out a bunch of undocumented students and I want them to be deported. How would you feel if he said that? Like, would you feel like it was right for them to host?
That seems very unlikely. That seems...
Well, that's what he did. So this is what a lot of people don't realize. That's exactly what he did before he came to UC Berkeley. That's exactly what he said.
Okay, and I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, and he also he went to Wisconsin. It was like the Madison, Wisconsin, the University of Madison at Wisconsin. And when he went there, he outed a transgender student and made fun of her. and she basically had dropped out of the school, and I don't even know if she ever went back to school afterward. Basically ruined her life. So I think, I'm definitely a person who's in favor of free speech. The problem with people like him is that they use speech to attack people and harm them and have them like incur like the wrath of trolls, right? So that's a little bit different to me. And I think when people think of it that way, they start to realize why there would be such a strong pushback against him. So yeah, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, and I'll have to look into that a little bit more. But yeah, I think there are definitely some problems with encroaching on free speech, and I don't think it applies to every situation. There are situations where people shouldn't be invited to speak places. That's probably a good thing. Obviously, they have a right to say whatever they want, but they don't necessarily need to be given a platform to do that if they're just going to be rude. I like it when people are nice. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of what's happened with men's rights and like speakers who are in support of the movement is they get shouted down.
Yes. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's like, why? This person hasn't done anything wrong. They're not attacking anyone. They're just calmly trying to make these issues known. Mm-hmm. And so that's definitely a problem. There are some issues with people attacking free speech at colleges and universities. There might be some circumstances where it is justified.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm definitely like someone who, the way that I would respond to it, and I've sort of done this. I don't know if you saw the video where I talked to Dave Rubin. That wasn't even like yeah. So basically, just to give a short story about what I did, I went to an event at UC Berkeley where Dave Rubin was there, and I told him, hey, I used to like what you did, and then I felt like you became a lot more of a right-wing shill. And I thought it was insane that you had on like Mike Cernovich and people like that, people who believe in Pizzagate, or Stefan Molyneux, who's like, basically a white supremacist who has an online cult. He's an online cult leader. So I think it was kind of crazy that you had these people on and you just like gave them, a platform to say whatever they want. You didn't push back against them at all. But at the same time, you never have any liberal people on your show anymore. So I called him out that time, and then basically he like censored what the Q&A of that video and never said anything about it. Then I went and called him out again at another event. So, the way I want to respond to people like Milo is like, I would go there and I would call them out and I would be like, this guy has outed trans people. He's called for people to be deported. He is a horrible piece of garbage. I would want to, create a counter event to their event. But yeah, people like Milo, they actively harm people, I think is the problem. They actively use their speech to harm people. And that can't be understated, I think,
Fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm not totally in favor of censoring people. I wouldn't want to do that, but I think some people, they take it to another level. Or another example was, I don't know if you've heard of the person Lindsay Shepard, but she got into a row with, she was a grad TA for a class. She showed Jordan Peterson video in a class, and some people got mad at her. So then the teachers brought her in and told her, hey, you can't do that. And then, she kind of blew up, and they're like, oh, why would you ever say that? And so, a lot of people took her side. So then she starts a free speech group, and she starts inviting like white supremacists to it. And then people are like, whoa, that's freaking crazy. And, then it got shut down or whatever. So I have a problem with like, always bringing on these like crazy alt-right people and just allowing them to say what they want to say without having any pushback. I think that's a problem. I think that's a big problem. I wouldn't say censor them, but like have them without anyone like on the other side. That's a huge problem. But yeah, I mean, what would you say? What do you think of that?
And in that case, it's hard to hard to do anything about that because there's no way of anticipating if someone's going to go and start a group and, you know, start talking up white supremacists. There's no way to tell if someone's going to do that unless they, you know, say they're going to. It's pretty rare. So I don't think that's necessarily a reason to say these people shouldn't be doing things. As this goes on, I'm getting more and more incoherent.
It's hard. Like a lot of these things there's not a clear answer, right? Either way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it kind of needs to be just a case-by-case basis. And you can't say, like, ban all the right-wingers from campus. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you plan on starting the Mild Maverick Club at your new school?
Oh, gosh, I plan on keeping it a secret for as long as possible. I'm worried. I'm legitimately worried.
You are. You're legitimately worried. You think people are going to judge you for being a centrist?
They did at my my last school. My last school was tiny, though, like tiny. There were like 200 kids, grades 6 through 12.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and so they were all hyper liberal. There were no conservative. No, there was one conservative, and he didn't talk because if he talked, he would get shouted down. And yeah. I tried to publish an article in my school magazine, which I ran at the time, about men's issues. And the other person who was editing with me at the time basically tried to censor the entire thing. She was a terrible person too, but, but I experienced so much backlash at my old school, and I basically got to the point where I almost had no friends. Like, no one wanted to talk to me, and I'm a little worried about that. I know with more people it's going to be different, and they do have a bipartisan coalition, which I feel like might be cool. But yeah, I'm a little worried. I'm only going to reveal my channel to people who I trust. It feels like I'm doing this underground thing.
I don't think. Look, anyone who would like not be your friend because, I mean, you're not even like super like moderate, you know. I mean, you there are some things where you know we disagree, but you're not like I had a debate with a guy and he was saying, yeah, we should take the kids away from their families. Like, you're not on that level, you know. And I don't know. I just feel like if someone's gonna, because you say you're not a feminist, if they on face value are not gonna be your friend, like I don't know if you really want to be their friend.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to keep like speaking out about men's issues. I'm just gonna try to not go near the F word.
Sure.
Because it's so. I feel like people are more open to men's issues if you don't say I'm not a feminist.
Yeah.
I feel like feminists hear that they just tune out, and I did that too when I was a feminist. I can't say, you know, these terrible people not listening to the other side, because that's just so common, and I did that too. Yeah,
for sure. I think that's a problem. I think, you know, I'm always open to hearing the other side most of the time, unless they're like a white supremacist or something, or some insane person. You know, but yeah, I think that, you know, like you should definitely hear out the other side for everyone on all topics. But I think one thing I would tell you is like the number of people in the world that are terrible human beings is pretty high. So
I disagree. Okay. People are nice.
I think people are nice, but like if there's someone who would not be your friend, like what you're telling me is like you're at a small school and you tried to write an article about men's rights, and because of that and other things, people weren't your friend.
Yeah,
that's kind of, if that's true, then a lot of those people were like not good people, like because they would agree with you on most things. And
no, they.
Oh, okay.
No, they were nice. they just, politics is so polarized. I feel like it's not just bad people who won't listen to the other side. It's anyone who doesn't take the time to really investigate the issues is going to think, oh yeah, those people are terrible people. And just like I was like that when I was a feminist, I was like that when I was like much more left, significantly more left, very left. I was very left.
Yeah, I know about the very left, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And I remember saying to my mom, she has a couple friends who are Trump supporters. I was like, you can't be friends with them. You can't be friends with them. And it was just kind of my reaction to that. And that definitely needs to be discouraged. But I feel like when you polarize politics like that, that's what it turns into.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why I'm so hesitant to call Trump a racist, is I feel like it's going to devolve into, you're a racist. No, you're a racist.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I definitely feel like the polarization is a huge problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't resent people for, not wanting to be my friend because of my views. I can kind of understand where they're coming from. And I think it's terrible that our society has gotten to the point where that is so common, because I think it is, especially when you get to like really far sides of the political spectrum, alt-right and alt-left. There's a lot of that. The more polarized you get, the worse it gets. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've definitely, I don't think I've lost any friends for any of my views, which has been good.
Interesting.
Yeah, but then again, like I've always been, I feel like my friends have always tracked with where I've been. Like I used to be a libertarian, and my libertarian friends that I keep up with are a little bit closer to where I am now. So I don't know.
Yeah, that kind of happened with me. Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like anyone who wouldn't be your friend, like, I don't know. I don't know if I think super highly of them. Like, you seem like a very nice, very moderate person, very like friendly.
Well,
like
you.
I don't see why I'd be like, oh my God, she's so horrible. Like, did you hear what she said about feminism? She said she's not
Awful.
a feminist. Can you believe it? She said she's not a feminist. We need to like excommunicate her.
That's kind of what happened.
Yeah, because what it tells me is like they didn't, like, these are people who didn't like investigate further, because like more than likely if people went further into like what you think, they would understand where you're coming from, because your position is not extreme. It's not like your position is, I'm against feminism because I think women should be in the kitchen pregnant and they need to shut up. That's not your position. Your position is more nuanced.
Yeah.
Right. So that means that someone's not willing to take the time to like learn more about you. And
well, it's such a loaded word too. There's so much like controversy around that word, and it's polarized there too. It's not just left and right. It's also feminist and not feminist. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, what would you say some of the views where you've become more conservative on?
I mean, mostly I'm just not like far left in a sense.
Yeah.
And I don't like a lot of what goes on with, what people usually call SJWs. So I guess that could be considered as somewhat more conservative, but yeah, I think I took a political compass test a while ago. It put me as slightly more conservative. And I think it was because it asked all these questions about like whether companies should have a moral conscience. I mean, I don't think they should. Their primary goal is to make money.
Right.
I think they need to be restricted for sure, but that's not the company's job. And I think that might have put me as more conservative.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Would you say that you're in favor of capitalism?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
just because nothing else works. It sucks, but nothing else works.
Yeah.
If something else does work, great. But
But would you say you're in favor of America-style capitalism or European-style capitalism more?
I think there are aspects of both that are good. I don't know.
What would you say is better about American-style capitalism?
I like my country. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
That was a very good answer, and I think a very true answer.
Thank you. Yeah, that's why it's better, because I like America.
Honestly, I think that's how a lot of people feel, is like they've been told, hey, you know, our system is really good. Look how wealthy we are. We're the most wealthy country in the world. So that means we're correct, you know, and people believe that.
That's true. I mean, the problem is I'm not that familiar with like European capitalism. I don't know that much about foreign policy. Because I feel like to know foreign policy, you kind of have to know like the history of every single country, and that's really hard.
On a certain level, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with European capitalism, so it's hard for me to compare the two and see the differences. Okay. It's something I should look into. I should make a list. I should have made a list throughout this of like things I need.
Sure, yeah.
I need to look at. Yeah.
So many topics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I kind of actually would say that I agree with your position. I believe that, I mean, I kind of dive deeper. Like I say, you know, it's capitalism, but it's like what's good about it is open markets for trade of goods, and the means of production is not, the majority of it is not owned by the state. Like that's really what people mean by capitalism, basically. Those things are good, but it needs to be regulated. Companies need to be regulated because they're not just going to do good on their own.
Yes, I agree. And they shouldn't be required. They shouldn't be expected to. I think it's so funny when companies try to make it seem like they're these good organizations. And it's like, no, you're not. You're trying to make money. Don't try to pretend you're this like benevolent organization, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And we need a government that is taking the people's interest over the interests of corporations, because corporations are only going to be about their fiduciary bottom line.
Yeah.
That's all they do. And I think there are some things that are better run by the state or have high state involvement. So like healthcare, I think if you just look at the European countries, healthcare is better having more of a universal government-run healthcare system. Something like cell phones, you don't need the government to be involved in cell phones.
No, you do not.
So these are two separate things, and we should look at like the policy outcomes of having government involvement in one or the other in whatever capacities.
Yeah.
But, you know, but that's basically what's considered like capitalism or a mixed economy, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a good thing to end on. Do you feel like there's anything else you want to talk about or say about yourself or your channel?
Come visit Mild Maverick. I'm really like plugs for myself. No, I don't think there's anything else I want to say. I feel like we've covered everything.
Yeah.
Pretty thoroughly. And yeah, in my next video on my channel, I'll refer back to this as well.
Yeah. Cool.
Not a lot of my subscribers follow me on Twitter because I'm terrible at Twitter. I don't know.
You have to promote yourself shamelessly. Promote yourself.
I can't. It's hard. Every time at the end of the video, I'm like, subscribe to my channel, please, if you want to.
Yeah. You should call yourself, like, in parentheses, modest Mild Maverick.
Modest Maverick. No, because
you're modest.
That by definition isn't modest. Like, oh, I'm so modest. That's not modest.
So, like, what if it was like people say modest Mild Maverick? It's like referring to like other people call you modest. Maybe that would work. I don't know.
I don't know. That's
anyway. Yeah. So yeah, check out her stuff. It's awesome. It's very interesting.
Thanks for doing the plug for me.
Yeah, and check her out on Twitter. I think you should tweet more, but yeah, check her out on Twitter and like.
Don't check me out.
And like
How do I use a hashtag?
Send her, yeah, send her
I need
tweets,
someone
and
to
then
teach
she'll
me.
probably respond.
Yeah, I will, because I don't get many tweets.
Yeah, you responded to me pretty quickly, so.
Yeah, it's because I'm on the computer like half my life.
Yeah, yeah. All right, cool. Say la vie, hasta la vista, everyone. Um, I'll have some more streams with different people in the future. I think the next one, I'm gonna talk to this Gamergate guy again. I've talked to him a couple times, so yeah, that'll be interesting. So look forward to that. Take care. Bye bye.